We lost the greatest son ever over the weekend. We'll talk about his life and career next on PHNX Suns. Who's the greatest son of all time? Is it Charles Barkley, Steve Nash, Walter Davis, Alvin Adams, maybe even Devin Booker already? There's an argument to be made for each and the impact they've had on the franchise and their legacy in purple and orange. That said, they're all the wrong answer. There's only one man in the conversation, and that man is Al McCoy. He spent the longest tenure of anyone with the team, having spent 51 seasons behind the mic in Phoenix, providing the soundtrack to every joyous and heartbreaking moment in franchise history. His catchphrases,
a swisheroo for two,
have become ingrained in the Valley's lexicon. Whether you started listening to him on KTAR, saw him on Channel 45 alongside Cotton Fitzsimmons, or only know him from the clips the team posted on social media, the second you hear his dulcet tones, you instantly know who it is and that the Purple Gang from Phoenix is about to do something truly special on the court. From the shot heard around the world,
second remaining in the second overtime. Here's Perry to Gar Hurd. Here's the jump shot. Good! It's good! It counts! Gar Hurd ties it! We'll go to the third overtime.
The Cotton Express and Barkley's game winner over David Robinson,
With 5, with 4, with 3, puts up a long shot and scores it! He scores it!
to the Nash Rambler,
by the Nash Rambler.
Book's bubble buzzer beater, and the Valley Oop, McCoy was on the call for every Shazam and every time we checked into the Heartbreak Hotel. He helped us experience every emotion known to man and somehow always made them feel stronger than we already felt them. While welcoming him into our homes on television and radio, he became more than just a man with a mic. He began to feel like a friend and then simply a member of the family. A constant in life that you could count on to be there at least 82 nights a year while others came and went. But Al was much more than just what was seen or heard on team broadcasts. He was a kind man with many talents. He loved to play the piano, and many times when the team was on the road, you could find him in the hotel lobby tickling the ivory. He was immensely funny when you got to know him and always had an opinion to offer, regardless of the subject. He also always had a story based on his experiences for every situation that either left you thinking or left you laughing. Plus, he was always willing to talk to fans and pose for pictures when asked, while remaining humble through it all. Simply, he was the biggest ambassador of basketball in the Valley. But it wasn't just basketball that Al was passionate about. He was an avid baseball fan and even called Phoenix Giants games in the Pacific Coast League in the 1950s and was behind the mic when Phoenix won its first championship ever. He also called Phoenix Roadrunners games in minor league hockey and even did ASU football. It's not bad for a kid who grew up in Iowa with no electricity and only a battery-powered radio as his gateway to the world of sports and dreams beyond his small town. In a world full of division, a voice like Al McCoy's was always able to bring us together as Phoenix Suns fans above all else. But, as they say, heroes never truly die. He'll live on in the hearts and minds of those who grew up and lived in the Valley. His presence will be felt every time a fan walks into the Purple Palace, aka the Footprint Center, in every call one of the broadcasters he helped along the way makes, and in every basketball game in the great state of Arizona. Al McCoy is the greatest son of all time, and it isn't even close. While we may never see you again, we'll be seeing you all the time. So on behalf of the Valley and Suns fans everywhere, Al, so long for now.
Thank you
for 51 wonderful years and allowing me to bring the story of the Suns in the NBA to you. It's been a great ride.
Welcome into the PHNX Suns show. I am Espo. That is Gerald. And on Saturday afternoon, the Phoenix Suns announced that legendary broadcaster Al McCoy had passed away at the age of 91. Gerald, it was difficult. I know for the entire Valley, and not going to lie, for me personally as well, Saturday I was at a kid's birthday party and got the news and actually found myself crying in a rock climbing gym with a bunch of children around me. I didn't expect it to hit the way it did, but I think that's kind of the way the Valley felt. We all knew at 91 that the time would eventually come, but that said, it was still difficult.
Yeah, I mean it's an incredible loss, and at the same time it's an incredible reminder of how important he was to this fan base, to this community, to this city. I got to tell you, in talking with a lot of his former coworkers, broadcasters, Suns employees, journalists who got to know him on the beat, I didn't get the chance to know Al McCoy very well because I only spent 3 years full time on the beat, and he was only there for 2 of them. But in talking with everybody, I've never done a story on somebody where the overwhelming consensus is the same about how much he meant to the team, to them personally, how much he helped them, how kind he was, how generous with his time he was. It's a really humbling and like I said, overwhelming experience to talk to that many different people and them all say the same thing, and yet all have their own different stories and different connections with him. That really is something special, and as much as it hurts and it's a painful time for a lot of people, it's also a great reminder of why we get into this business in the first place, and all the happy and even sad memories that we had with Al McCoy on the call for the highs and lows of the Phoenix Suns for 51 years.
Yeah, and we'll get into stories and celebrations of Al. I just, man, I don't think we'll ever see somebody that does 51 years with a franchise, one franchise, and is so synonymous with a team and his impact. I don't know that we'll ever see a broadcaster that's quite as intertwined with the players as well. We saw a lot of people. Rex Chapman was all over Twitter, commenting on people's posts and sharing things, and it was pretty obvious Al had a huge impact on him. We'll get into Eddie Johnson, who was a dear friend of Al's. Jeff Hornacek was on a tribute that Channel 12 did. They were kind enough to invite me to be part of it, and Jeff Hornacek also shared his thoughts, and it was pretty clear that Al made it a point to be the same kind of person to everybody, whether you were that athlete on the team or you were some kid that came up to him when you were 9 years old saying that you wanted to get into the business. He treated everybody the same way. The Suns released some statements on Saturday after the announcement was officially made about Al's passing, and Devin Booker, the great Phoenix Sun, had a lot to say about him. Quote, "I had the privilege of Al McCoy narrating the first 8 years of my career. He was inducted into the Ring of Honor my second season, and it was then I really understood what a special talent he was. And over the course of my career, I've learned what an even more special person he was. We'll miss Al, and I'm so glad our legacies in Phoenix are forever connected." And the thing that stood out to me, I was at Al's Ring of Honor ceremony. It was the year after I left the Suns, so I wasn't there in a working capacity. I went, and John Bloom actually had to be on mic for it, so he let me sit in his courtside media seat, and to my right was the Suns bench, and Devin was there, came out, watched the whole thing, was there taking in what it meant. And it was pretty obvious that the gravity of it kind of hit him, and he understood it. And then on Al's final home game there, Devin takes off his jersey, signs it to Al, hands it to him, to see a kid that was at that point 19, in his second season, with realizing how important this man in his late 80s was, and a friendship that kind of formed between the two of them is unbelievable. I mean, last year at the Ring of Honor ceremony opening night, Devin and Al walked into the arena together, Devin with his arm around him, and that's just unbelievable to me that many generations apart, he still had a strong relationship with Devin.
Yeah, I mean, Book, we've talked about this before. He's a class act when it comes to this type of stuff, and he understands the importance of Suns history and the people that help make this franchise what it is. But it's not an uncommon thing for all of these players that developed special relationships with Al. I was hearing a story from someone that when Walter Davis was inducted into the Ring of Honor, Al McCoy was the MC for that event. And afterwards they shared a hug, and it was just so genuine. And somebody took a picture of that hug that they shared, and Al had it in his office for years. And it's just one of those things. EJ was telling me that when he first came to the Suns, like, he knew who Al was from playing around the league, because he's a guy who liked to keep his game tape. So he knew Al McCoy's voice, but just coming to the Suns and getting to know him better, like, Al made a point of knowing the players beyond just surface level. He wanted to know about their families. He wanted to know about what made them tick. And obviously back then it was a different environment in terms of how often the broadcasters were around the players and traveling together. It was more of a tight-knit group than it is now. But even recently, Al McCoy, he never knew any other way. He would always go out of his way to get to know these players. And unless they told him, no, I don't want to talk, like, that's just how he went about business. And it is a very rare thing in this industry for, the broadcast or the journalism side to get to know that many players on such a fundamentally deep level. And it's why we saw so many statements from former Suns players when this happened.
Yeah, Steve Nash, another one, two-time MVP, had this to say about Al McCoy, quote, "I got to work with the great Al McCoy for 10 incredible years. His energy and spirit were unmatched, and I'll never forget all the conversations and laughs we shared. He was a teammate that never wore a jersey. He loved the Phoenix Suns as much as anyone, and his legacy will endure the generations of Suns fans to come. Lots of love to the one and only Al McCoy." And look, that's Steve Nash. Like, and I was told that he, a couple of weeks ago, came into town to just go sit with Al for a couple hours, and that Al just talked basketball and had a good time with him. Everybody, I think, kind of had an idea of what was coming. Al was in hospice, but just coming in to talk with Al, and I don't think we'll ever see a broadcaster that has that. I mean, this is Steve Nash, two-time MVP, and made it a point to come and spend time with Al in his final weeks. And just hearing that and knowing he got to come in and that Al got that experience in the final weeks, it meant a lot to hear. So.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to his professionalism and the person that he was. It also speaks to the longevity that, Devin Booker, Steve Nash, and an even earlier chapter, Charles Barkley, all came out and released statements. This is what Charles Barkley had to say in his statement. "This is a sad day for the Suns and the Suns family. Al McCoy represented everything that is great about Phoenix, the Phoenix Suns, and people who love basketball. I was blessed and honored to work with Al, and I'm going to miss him." And, we got 3 former MVP winners there, and then we got Devin Booker on top of that, the current face of the franchise, and so many other players and broadcasters coming out on Twitter and honoring him. it just kind of struck me that going back to when he was first inducted into the Ring of Honor, and then when he called his final game, there were these video tributes, and they included all of these guys that we're hearing from now. So it wasn't just, the Suns contacted me and I gave them a statement type of thing. It was, I really genuinely got to know this guy over the years.
Yeah, Mike Budenholzer, and we don't have the exact quote, but he also gave his condolences over the weekend, and it will not be lost on me that introductory press conference. Actually, that was the last time I got a chance to see Al and talk with him, but how much Mike Budenholzer himself, growing up here in Phoenix, had such reverence for Al as well. You could tell the fact that Al was the guy that introduced him meant so much. That hug, excuse me, that hug that the two of them shared at that press conference, and the fact that Mike Budenholzer was like bowing down to the legend. I believe that's what he said, the legend, Al McCoy. And then Al taking photos with Bud and his dad. Like, I love that the head coach of the Phoenix Suns in this season that will be remembrance of Al is a guy that understands and appreciates what he meant to the franchise and what succeeding this year could mean in Al's memory too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's special. Like he was saying it himself. He grew up listening to Al call, Westy and Sweet D and Double A and all these different games. So to have him introducing Mike Budenholzer when he's introduced as the coach of the Phoenix Suns was a special thing for him. And like I said, every single person in this organization has a story like that of some sort, of how he went out of his way to make them feel special, just the aura that he had, but also the way that he was kind and made you feel like his equal, despite the fact that he had been around longer than anybody. That's a really special thing for a mentor and a friend to have.
We will share more personal stories about our experience with Al McCoy, as well as some stories from the broadcasters and players that got the chance to know him on the other side after we hear from our sponsors. Ironically enough, our first sponsor is somebody that Al worked with over the years as well. Our friends over at Sanderson Ford, who are a proud sponsor of PHNX. They are official vehicle partners here with us. And Sanderson Ford is giving you big payoffs, like 0% financing on the new F-150 Escape, Edge, Explorer, and Expedition. I highly recommend that you head out to their 65-acre facility. They've got some of the best salespeople I have dealt with personally and in looking for a car as well. They are great people out there at Sanderson Ford, and you expect nothing less from a family-owned dealership who wants to help you get in the car of your dreams. They thrive on no hassle, no pressure, no nonsense sales approach. So you're not going to go out there and be frustrated with your experience. They want you to be as happy with your experience buying the car as you will with owning the car. So again, get deals on the 2024 Bronco Sport for 5.9 APR for 66 months, plus $2,000 must be financed through Ford Motor Credit OAC. Also, help them celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month with Dia de los Muertos inspired trunk or treat at Sanderson Ford. I believe this is on October 19th coming up, but see dealership for details. A great way for your kids to enjoy the upcoming Halloween and Dia de los Muertos holidays. And then, you know what, our friends over at Bet365, nothing's ever ordinary with them. You gotta love that over 90 million people worldwide trust their sports betting experience to our friends at Bet365. They pioneered live in-game betting, and they are the pioneers of easy payouts, like early payouts across the NBA, MLB, NFL. In the NBA, your team goes up 20 points or more, you're going to automatically win your money line bet. So today, sign up for Bet365 with that code PHNX 365, and you can get two options: bet and get, where you place a $5 bet or more and get $200 in bonus bets, or the first bet safety net offer by placing a bet of $1,000 up to $1,000. If your qualifying bet loses, you're going to receive a refund in bonus bets of the amount that you put there. It's that simple with our friends at Bet365. Download their app, use the promo code PHNX365 when you sign up, choose your offer, and find out why, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 and over, physically located in AZ. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. Text NEXT-STEP to 53342 or visit problemgambling.az.gov. So we are going to talk more about Al McCoy and Gerald, and I want to spend a little time telling some of the stories that you heard and a couple of my own. If you don't mind, I'd like to start with one. For me, Al McCoy is the reason I got in this business, and I've shared this before, but obviously genetically I was never going to be the power forward of the Phoenix Suns. That was the dream initially, watching Charles Barkley. I played power forward when I was younger because I had some height back then, but I realized early on that wasn't going to be the dream. So listening to Al, watching what he was able to do on Channel 45, what he did on KTAR, I thought, well, you know what? I could do that. It helped that Al wasn't, the largest of gentlemen in terms of height. So I was like, I can do this. And I remember at 9, I got the opportunity to go out to a game, and I wrote Al a letter and gave it to him after and told him, Mr. McCoy, this is really what I want to do. He was so gracious, so kind. And that always stuck with me. But the one that really stuck with me, he came out with his book, The Real McCoy. Highly recommend picking it up if you haven't read it. And he wrote it, I was about 24, so 16 years ago or so. And I got the opportunity to write a feature article for a local magazine on Al in the book. And, he was gracious with his time, gave me 25, 30 minutes, asked him whatever I wanted, gave me an advance copy of the book, and really gracious. So I write the story. It comes out in the magazine and online, and I come to my phone a couple days later, and I see I had missed a call and had a voicemail, and I pick it up, and it's Al, and it's a 5-minute voicemail thanking me for writing the article, telling me that people back home in Iowa read it and they were moved. And he goes on for 5 minutes, like I said, and it always struck me. He had no reason to call me or thank me for writing something. He went out of his way to do that out of the kindness of his heart and genuinely wanting to thank me. And you don't get that a lot in this world, let alone in the sports world and in the business that we're in. It can make people jaded. It can make, a lot of different things. That always reminded me that if I got to do this for a profession, to treat people the right way, to be kind, to be generous with your time, to try to respond in a timely manner, and help people along the way. And that one, that always stuck with me. I had that because I'm old. I had that voicemail on a digital recorder. It was on an old work phone, and I recorded it. Had it for years. I saw the recorder a couple months ago. I got to see if it still works. But that will always stick with me, and stuck with me when I got to know him working at the Suns, because that was just the man he was. He was that kind when you got to know him, even on a personal level.
That's beautiful, and it's special to everyone who has a story like that. And what's crazy is every person has a story like that. Yeah. That's the thing that I found in talking to different people for the features that I wrote over the weekend. I feel like when I talked to K-Ray, he was talking about how he had moved from small place. He graduated from Pittsburgh, Kansas, moved to Flagstaff, was kind of covering the team from there with the local radio station, but they were affiliated with the Suns. So when the Suns went up to Flagstaff for training camp, Al McCoy reached out to Kevin Ray directly and wanted to take him to lunch. And just the fact that, you know, he would do that for someone that he doesn't really know, just one of many examples. Another one was from Steve Albert, former TV play-by-play guy for the Suns. He was saying that when he first got the job with the Suns, he was there for about 5 years. He came down to the then U.S. Airways Center, and Al took him through the entire office complex and introduced him one by one to every single person, cubicle to cubicle. And
I was one of those people.
Yeah, and Steve Albert was so amazed because Al knew everybody by name. He was introducing them. This is so-and-so. This is so-and-so. And he was blown away. Like, how does he remember all these people? And at the very end, he confronted Al. He was like, Al, that was amazing. Like, how do you remember all these different people? And Al said, Steve, they all had nameplates in front of the cubicle.
We did. And the cubicle was right on the wall.
So, but he was like, the point is just the fact that he would even do that and go person by person. Hi, this is Steve. He's going to be working here now, and all that kind of stuff. It just spoke to his generosity and how generous he was with his time, because I think every fan that ever got to meet Al McCoy would tell you the same thing in terms of, like, yeah, I came up and told him he called this and I remember this, or this is my favorite call. He probably heard that dozens of times about every call that he made, but he was still so willing to just have a conversation with you about the Suns, no matter who you were. And he always made time for people that approached him.
Well, he genuinely loved the team too. I remember he had come down to where our offices were. We were on the 3rd floor. His office was on the 4th floor at the Footprint Center. And he came down and he's like, Espo, I found the score sheet from the triple overtime game in 1976. And invited me up to his office and proceeded to talk for 20 minutes about the score sheet and his memories of that game and all this. And it was just those little things like that. He cared that much about the game. It wasn't just a job. It wasn't just, oh, well, you know, it's nice. And he wasn't just, you know, having those conversations with people when they came up to try to be polite. He genuinely enjoyed basketball. Eric, I know you had some stories about your time at the radio station and Al as well.
Yeah, so obviously kind of like growing up the same way with you, Espo, the reason why I wanted to be a sports broadcaster was because of Al McCoy. And radio was always a fascination for me. I had my mom's radio that she used from college. I used in high school and had it next to my bed. And I would listen to Suns games like doing chores around the house, and it was ingrained in my head. So eventually I go to college, graduate, get hired at the local radio station here and doing producing work for them. And I was able to produce some Suns games. And Al McCoy said my name on a broadcast, thanking everybody at the end. And I have that audio saved because I'm like, as a kid growing up here, hearing him, listening to games with my dad and my mom, and my dad talking about how all these phrases and stuff he had developed over the year, like learning all about that, and then being the smallest little part of that was such a big deal for me. And I think one of the coolest things I've ever been able to do in this industry was after Al retired, there was an event out at Sanderson Ford for the radio show I was producing, and I was able to go out there and be sitting at the table when Al came on and was talking about everything. And my dad had a vinyl from the 1976 season, and I got him to sign it for me on air. And then he went and he talked to like every single fan that had showed up there for him. It was just such like a surreal moment for an Arizona kid. So nice. Down to like he was retired. He was done. He had already called his last game. He didn't have anything that he had to give to anybody anymore. And he still showed up and spent so much time talking to fans, talking to me. And that's just, I mean, the perfect encapsulation of who he is.
Was that the Cinderella Suns record?
So it's hanging up in my office.
Yeah, Espo has the same
has
one.
it. Paul Coro, who I talked to for this article, he grew up listening to that. And so when he was playing One on None in his West Phoenix hoop, you know, reciting these things from this record, it does speak to another common thread that I found talking to people, is that there is multiple generations of Suns fans that grew up listening to their parents tell stories about Al McCoy, listening to Al McCoy on the call. there's not really anybody in the history of the franchise that has touched that kind of cross section of different generations of Suns fans. It's really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, I was a similar way. Grew up listening to the radio in my room with Al, and then to be able to be on his broadcast was surreal for me.
Mhm.
Like, I only did it 2 years. I have no impact on Al's legacy. I'm not trying to claim that in any way, but it was unbelievable to just be able to say, I was on Al McCoy's broadcast. Like, I
Mhm.
did halftime. He and Tim Kempton would leave their courtside seats. John Bloom and I would slide in, and I would put on the same headset that Al McCoy had just been wearing, describing this game, and we would do a halftime show. Then Al would throw it to us in the post game show. And
He said your name. Isn't
yeah,
that crazy?
I mean, for a kid that grew up with that being the goal, to be able to work that closely with him, to be on his broadcast, one of a handful of people that were, it meant the world to me. But how kind he was as part of it continually blew me away with it. Always encouraging, always kind to talk to. Like, somebody in the chat said, "Oh, Al's the exception to the don't meet your heroes," right? And I think it's Ted said it, and I think that's so true, because I have met plenty of people in this industry that I thought, oh, always enjoyed this guy, and afterwards I never want to listen or talk to that guy again.
Yeah.
And Al was so far from it. Man, yeah, it's crazy to me. And you were talking about generations knowing, like, my daughter knows who he is. She would listen to the end of games, with me sometimes, or she'd know I was going, and I was going to talk with him. And I told her, because obviously I was at that kid's birthday party for her,
Right.
with her friends. I said to her, Mr. McCoy, my friend died, and she gave me a hug, and and she knows who he is, and the importance. And that's, I mean, it's insane. She's 8,
Right.
like, how many generations is that
Yeah.
that are aware of who he is? And I think it's on all of us to make sure that we keep his memory and what he meant to this city and franchise alive, even though he's no longer here.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I want to give a lot of love to. A lot of the current Suns broadcasters have all incorporated things from Al McCoy into their own work, learned from him in specific ways, because he was such a giving mentor and a willing advice giver. There was Tom Leander, who grew up a Suns ball boy. He would, I think during the 1976 season, because Suns games weren't on TV at that point, he would listen on the radio and he would chart, Alvin Adams stats based on Al McCoy's calls. And then in college, when he was getting into the broadcast business, he would jot down different catchphrases and different ways to describe actions so that he could do it as well as Al McCoy would one day. And it's crazy because in 2003, the Suns switched from doing their simulcast with radio and TV. So Al McCoy went back to only doing radio. And that was kind of Tom Leander's opportunity to be on TV as a play-by-play guy. And it could have been an uncomfortable situation, but Leander said that Al McCoy called him into his office and said, it's your time, no hard feelings. And he didn't have to do that at all. But for someone who grew up idolizing this man, to be called into his office at that point in time and empowered in that way was special. EJ talked about how he called himself, I was a wild Colt, man. Like I was cocky. I thought I knew everything. Well, even more so on the broadcast back then, apparently. But he was saying, he had to kind of train me. Like, he would point at me when it was my turn to talk, because I was just so excited and I thought I knew everything. And the first game, he showed up with a big board full of stats and info, like the one that Al would have before every game. And Al took it and tore it up and said, you don't need that. Like, your job is to describe what's happening. And he kind of trained up EJ in that way. And EJ said he was hard on him, but he became a better broadcaster for it. So it's just little stories like that really speak to again, how generous he was with his time, because he could have just been wrapped up in his own thing, being the voice of the Suns, doing every Suns game because he barely ever missed games. But at the same time, he was helping everybody around him become better and eventually be in a position to succeed with the Suns as well.
So outside shots this morning was really good. A little bumpy with technical difficulties at first, but once we got in there, Eddie and Saul sharing great stories, and Tim Kempton came on. And Tim Kempton's first season was Al's 30th season. And Al told him, he's like, I maybe got 1 or 2 left in me. And if that doesn't show how much Al absolutely loved this game, the fact that he made it 21 more years after that, like that to me was such like an incredible, like, wow, like that dude cares. He's committed and he loves it. Fantastic listen if you guys haven't listened to that or watched it yet on our channel, Outside Shots this morning. Kempton, EJ, and Saul, it was awesome.
We are going to hear from more people that were impacted by Al McCoy, some familiar voices on the other side, but we're going to hear from our sponsors right now. Our friends at Circle K, America's thirst stop. I actually have to stop there on my way home because I am out of gas. And they're going to help me because I save 5 cents when I go to the pump every time because I'm part of the Inner Circle. And right now you can sign up to become a member of the Inner Circle. It's easy. You just download the Circle K app, enter your email and your phone number, and you are enrolled. And what you're going to get, you're going to save 25 cents on your first 5 fill-ups. That's that simple. Then after that, you're going to get 3 cents off per gallon. And when you reach the ESPO level, you're going to get 5 cents. And somehow Mrs. Espo reached that now too, so she reminds me I'm not all that special. But you can also get plenty of member-exclusive deals and discounts. You're also going to get your first 5 Polar Pops for free. So, join the Inner Circle today for free by downloading that Circle K app. Terms and conditions apply at participating locations. Visit CircleK.com for details. And as Lindsay always reminds you, try the chocolate-covered almonds as well. Our friends over at Chicken and Pickle, they've got a great thing going over there. If you like pickleball, if you like chicken, you're going to love Chicken and Pickle. It's that simple. Their food is next level, and their pickleball courts are some of the best I have ever played on. They didn't make me play better because I'm terrible at pickleball, but their courts are spectacular. You're going to want to check it out, and you know what? You're going to want to be out there next Sunday as our PHNX Cardinals tailgate takes place out there. It is fun. You're going to meet a lot of great friends of the program and just other Cardinals fans that you can become friends with as well. So go to gophnx.com for full details on the tailgate. And you know what? If you're new to pickleball, they got newbie nights out there. So you don't have to worry about, I feel out of place. All these people are going to be great. No, they'll teach you how to play. So head to chickenandpickle.com to see all the fun you can have at their Glendale location. And join us on Sunday for sure. So we promised some additional stories from people that knew Al well. Gerald spent a long time putting together some interviews with people that worked with Al and got to know him. And here is a supercut of a bunch of those stories.
He's everything to this franchise. He really is. I mean, even though he was not here the very first year, and Jerry Colangelo's, everybody likes to describe, birthed the Phoenix Suns franchise, Al McCoy basically reared the franchise, and we all grew up, and this franchise grew up with Al describing all of the great players and the great moments. And there's no greater compliment than that when you think of the Phoenix Suns, you think of Al McCoy. Anybody that's been around this team that has been in the city of Phoenix, it's almost synonymous. And you can talk about all the great players that have been here, but nobody was here longer than Al McCoy. And in my mind, nobody contributed more than what Al did to this franchise.
He's very professional. And, he loved his craft. He understood his craft. His voice is second to none. He was very personable. I mean, he knew all about you as a player. He would go a little bit past just knowing you, where he'd ask about your family and got to know your family as time went along. So, so it was a close-knit relationship that Al had with with any player that was a part of the Phoenix Suns organization.
Larger than life for the people who listened to him, especially back in the early days. I think the first time that they saw Al in person or saw pictures of Al, they were just blown away because of the power that came from this man and his voice. And it was like the voice, you know, the voice of a broadcast god. And you look at this man, you think, how is that coming out of this man? But it spoke to his makeup. And I think it is part of what made him so iconic.
The best ability is availability. Well, look how available Al McCoy was for 50 plus years as the voice of the Phoenix Suns. So if you were a Suns fan, you were absolutely an Al McCoy fan, and you felt like he was part of your family, and you still probably do. And that's just unbelievable to have that kind of an effect on that amount of people and do so through a media like radio.
He's the dean of broadcaster. He's the pinnacle of what anybody that's in broadcasting strives to be. And he is, he's what anybody that's in the business would only hope to be. And both in longevity and the way, the way he carried himself, how professional he was at his craft. And, if anybody could, you walk down the street with him or you walk in a restaurant, everybody knows Al. It's wonderful. When you're in Phoenix, he's, everybody knows Al, and everybody has a story where they were when something happened. I mean, what a special thing. I mean, if you grew up here, then you probably have a story too.
It was more than just a comrade in arms, a colleague, a fellow announcer. He just immediately became my best friend in Phoenix, and it wasn't an act. It was really from the heart. One thing, a lot of people say don't meet your heroes, right? Don't say that about Al McCoy because, he lived up to everything and even surpassed it with just how good of a person he is, in addition to a legendary broadcaster and all the other things that Al McCoy is.
There's no way to understate the impact Al McCoy had on Phoenix sports fans of multiple generations. I don't know that there's a person outside of Jerry Colangelo who has affected as many generations of sports fans as Al. And he's the constant voice that connects people throughout the city and brings back memories of joy and brings a whole lexicon of language that didn't exist before with Heartbreak Hotel and Shazam and what have you. But I don't know that there's many people in Phoenix that are as widely beloved as Al McCoy.
Sorry, it hit me hearing people talking in past tense about him on that. Obviously, a lot of people, recognizable names there, people who've made their own impact on the city of Phoenix in that cut there, and what he was able to do and the impact he was able to have with people is unbelievable. And thank you for chronicling a lot of that with your two stories on gophnx.com. I highly recommend going and reading them. It's well worth your time if you grew up a Suns fan or became a Suns fan later in life. You will appreciate all the stories that Gerald was able to get when it came to people's memories of Al and his impact. So please take the time to go check those out. I know you've had some stories in there that were pretty impactful. Was there any favorites that kind of stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, that super cut that we put together is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, because I probably talked to 10 to 15 different people, and they all gave me 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes on the phone just talking about Al. And there was so much that even condensing it into 4,000 word stories it felt like it was barely just scratching the surface. But There were a couple that stood out, like Tom Ambrose, who worked for the organization on the PR side and for Suns Charities for, I think, 37 years. He was telling me about, there was one interaction that Al had with an audience of blind Suns fans that were thanking him for how proficient he was with his play-by-play calls, because he painted these beautiful word pictures that they could see what was happening, even though they couldn't see what was happening. And Ambrose said that really struck Al and stuck with him in terms of, it meant a lot to him. Not just that, for obviously if you're listening to the radio, you can't see the game, but for Suns fans that literally could not see the game, to be able to paint it for them in that way was something that meant a lot to Al. And the other one that I knew that he could play the piano, but I didn't know how talented he was until I started talking to all these different people. And, Ambrose told me a story about, there was a time when it was John McLeod's birthday and they were up in Prescott for training camp, and they were all in this upstairs bar on Whiskey Row in Prescott there. And they heard a piano from the hallway. They had gathered all the players and personnel to celebrate John McLeod's birthday. And they hear a piano coming from the other room in the hallway. And suddenly there's two guys pushing in this grand piano and a third guy pushing Al McCoy on a stool. And he's moving, playing the piano, playing Happy Birthday for John McLeod in front of all these people. And they were just kind of blown away by that. And this is my favorite story. I don't know if a lot of people know this one, but Al McCoy, ironically enough, his favorite spot downtown here was a jazz club called the Nash. And when he was inducted into the Ring of Honor, it's a tradition that whoever's inducted into the Ring of Honor gets a special gift that's kind of tailor-made for them. Like Tom Chambers, when he was inducted, because apparently he's like a cowboy, he got a horse and a saddle. So for Al, Robert Sarver gifted him this, really expensive, beautiful grand piano for his induction back in 2017. And Al was like, thank you, but how the hell am I going to fit this in my house? Like I don't have space for this big grand piano. So he called up the owner of the Nash, who was a friend of his going back to the 80s. And he said, hey, I don't know if you saw, but I was inducted into the Ring of Honor. I was given this piano. I want to donate it to the Nash. And so he went to Sarver. They made it happen. And that piano is still in the Nash. They're currently remodeling, but it's still their piano on the main stage. And Al McCoy took this photo with it, and it hangs in the lobby on a plaque there. And it's just another example of his generosity, the type of person that he was. He could have sold that piano, or, could have asked for a separate gift, but instead he decided to take it and make this place that he loved even better. And I think that's just kind of the emblematic story of Al McCoy and the person that he was.
Yeah. The music always fascinated me. The fact that, and I briefly talked about it in the video we played at the beginning, but that he grew up in Iowa when he was a kid. They didn't have electricity. It wasn't a battery powered radio that kind of made him, love the spoken word in that way. That he was a comic book nerd when he was a kid. That's where Shazam comes from. It's the Mr. Marvel DC comic that turned into the Shazam movies. Like he resonated with that character. And when he told the story about when the 3-pointer came into the NBA, he thought it'd be like a home run call in baseball. So he thought, well, we got to spice it up. And he used Shazam. And now that is something that is just ingrained in all of us that knew him, and that was a Suns fan. So just an unbelievable life and story. I got to give a tip of the hat to Chris Garagiola and Dave Pash for working in Shazam and the D-backs broadcast this weekend and the Cardinals broadcast yesterday on Sunday. A great way to honor a gentleman that they all got to know as well. So can I tell one humorous story?
Yeah.
Okay. I told this on Tucson radio this morning, and I don't know if I should tell it or not. I said that there too, but I remember it's one of my favorite moments, and it's so obscure and it's ridiculous, but there was some kind of press conference that we got a notification from the PR staff at the Suns that, internal media should join the regular media for this down in the Al McCoy Media Center. So we all go down there, stage is set, and press conference is supposed to start. We're looking, we're going, what, why isn't it going on? Al walks down, looks around, sees that there's no media, and goes, guess we could have held this in the men's room. Turned around, walked out, got back on the elevator, went upstairs. Because it turned out the PR staff had forgotten to send out the release to anybody but internal, so they had to reschedule it. But like that, to me, it was just, it's this little thing that will always stick out in my mind because it was so human. And when you've listened to this guy and he's so buttoned up at everything, and then you hear that come out of the same voice you heard on the radio, like that will stick with me forever. I think you have one other story you want to play here, right?
I do, because it speaks to, like you're saying, Al was very proper and professional and buttoned up, but he also, just hearing him talk with people in the media room, it was so funny to hear what he was saying come out of that particular voice you were so used to hearing. But I talked to Steve Albert, and he had a fantastic story about one little adventure they had in Minnesota.
All the best restaurants on the road. Whenever we'd go to Minnesota, he'd take me to a place called Murray's, a great, old-fashioned steakhouse. It's only about a 10-minute walk from the hotel. Normally, that would be no problem. But when we arrived in Minneapolis the night before the game one time, it had to be about 10 below zero. And we debated whether we should just eat in the hotel or, brave the weather for a really good steak at Murray's. So we finally agreed, hey, we don't get to Murray's very often, so let's just go for it. And coming from Phoenix, you might say we weren't dressed appropriately for the frigid temperatures. We had overcoats, but for this climate, you needed a really heavy jacket. Also, a dog sled of Huskies wouldn't have hurt. And, throw in a St. Bernard and a hot toddy. Anyway, we made it to Murray's in one piece, although on the walk over, icicles had formed on my face and I had frostbite on my toes. So we finished our dinner, and Al and I actually thought about ordering a taxi for the 3-minute ride back to the hotel. And by now, it had to be like 15 below. But we decided to tough it out, and we put on our grossly underprepared outerwear and began our trip back to the hotel. Now, Al, in his mid-80s at the time, took off like Usain Bolt. I mean, he was a blur. And by the time I finally caught up with him, he was waiting for me in the lobby of our hotel. I mean, I'm talking minutes later. I didn't know what had happened to him. I thought he took a wrong turn or was frozen to a lamppost somewhere. He raced all the way back in what had to be record time for a play-by-play announcer in sub-zero weather.
I love that story because it encapsulates Al, but it also, Steve is one of my favorite broadcasters that I got to work with, and he's hilarious too. The two of them, I got a chance to go on the road with them a couple times in my time there, and that was kind of just those guys. So, yeah, look, I think this season is going to be all about honoring Al and his memory, and I think that goes without saying. I'm sure they'll do some kind of patch on the jersey. My guess is, if the league will allow, to probably say Shazam or something to that extent to remember him. I'd love to see a statue out in front of Footprint Center with Al in the broadcast booth and somewhere that a fan could sit and take a photo there. I'd love to see him rename the plaza. Look, I would love for it to happen on the 51st game this year because I think that would be an appropriate way to honor 51 years in the booth. I get it. It takes a while to make a statue. I'm not oblivious to that, but I would love some kind of honor. Maybe it's just, hey, we're going to dedicate the plaza and here's what a statue will look like for Al, that kind of thing. But obviously the ultimate goal will be to win one for Al. And if there was ever a year to go out there and beat the odds and change Suns history forever, it would be this one. So, and as Al said in one of his great calls, somebody up there is on our side, and I think we officially have somebody up there on our side. And if this is the year, it's going to probably be because of Al. So,
love it. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, just a reminder, would love for you guys to become a diehard here so you can get fantastic coverage of everything that goes on in Arizona sports. Things like Gerald's article, two-part article on Al McCoy and his legacy here. Great shows, other things, merch, all the like. You can get that by becoming a diehard today. Go to gophnx.com for that. Look, I don't think there's anything else that we could say about Al McCoy. Gerald, I appreciate your efforts and for sharing your insight and the stories that others told. Eric, behind the Mac, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with Al as well. You can follow Gerald at Gerald Bourget. You can follow Eric at Eric with a K. It's Eric Ruby on Twitter. You can follow the show at PHNX_Suns. And you can follow me at Espo. And you know what? I think there's only one way to end this one. Shazam.
We all silly like the mayor.